Welcome to Survey Booker Sessions. Tune in to hear from people working in a range of industries and roles to provide you ideas that you can take away and use in your own business. I'm your host, Matt Nally, the founder and director of Survey Booker, which is the leading CRM and survey management system for surveyors. On this week's episode, we have Nina Young from Surveyors UK. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me on, Matt. Really pleased to be here.
That's great to have you. Do you want to give us a bit of background as to who you are, and then we can sort of introduce what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, sure. My name's Nina Young. I am the founder of Surveyors UK. We are a new membership platform for the surveying profession and the wider industry in the UK. We're currently at a stage where we're literally rolling out the site as we speak. But I've predominantly got a very strong marketing background. And for my sins, which I don't tell many people, I'm also a chartered accountant.
Yeah. A lot of people want to keep that quiet. I don't know.
I know, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Do stay tuned.
Yawn.
That's an interesting background. So that's an interesting one then. So we're going to talk about new talent trouble in a moment, and that probably tie in with the student group that you've been running. But
Yeah,
how did you go from, I suppose, sort of chartered accountancy and marketing into sort of what you're doing now?
it's kind of evolved really. So, a chartered accountant in my early years, moved into risk management and auditing, mainly within the corporate sector, did a short stint in public sector. And then I ended up having a total career change because I got to a stage where I kind of moved up and I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. Hindsight, looking back, I was always destined to work for myself. So I left the sort of corporate world and moved into recruitment and marketing. I'm very much a self-taught marketeer. And then over the years, I've run different businesses and I've helped other people set up businesses. Having the chartered accountant background really helps with that. It gives you that kind of really good business grounding. And then things have just evolved and I kind of just seem to reinvent myself every so often over time.
That's good to do. I think you're right. I think having a focus on the numbers is important because it gives you a reality check as to whether what you're going to do is going to
Cash
work.
flow is king, isn't it? In a business, in your own business, cash flow is really king. Yeah.
And definitely, and sales don't match up with cash flow at all. So it's two different things.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, very different.
Awesome. Okay, so I suppose from there, how did you get into the surveying world and starting up the student group?
Yeah, so it was one of those things, and I think this happened to a lot of people. It was during COVID. So I had in a different industry, I had a job board, a career site for a different industry, but it was within the hospitality drinks sector. And with COVID, it wiped it out. So we'd gone from having 2,000 jobs a month to 20. But at that time, I'd already been doing before then property flips. I have a passion for stately homes, rented properties. So I've always had that real interest in the built environment anyway. And then I literally discovered that there was such a thing as this SAVA course, and I was able to train as a surveyor, a residential surveyor and valuer. So I jumped onto that. Very early on, this idea, Surveyors UK, came into my head, but I kind of put that on the back burner for a little bit, and then became a surveying student. And there was lots of WhatsApp groups. Students really you want to bounce ideas off each other, or you're getting maybe challenging case study or something like this. But the WhatsApp groups are really difficult because they just come and they just disappear. And when you've got lots of people on there, some of them like 200, you can't keep up and your phone's just pinging. And I thought, well, don't we need a dedicated area for students to be able to ask questions and have surveyors on there as well to support students? So then I set up, I ran it past a few industry leaders, and I set up the Student Surveyors group on Facebook. And then it just took off. I mean, we're about nearly 3,000 members now, but we have everyone from surveyors, qualified surveyors, professionals supporting students. And then we've got not just SAVA students, but we've got undergrads, postgrads, and that just grew over time. And it's just this really supportive community.
Interesting. Well, I suppose the context for this topic at the moment then is new talent trouble, which is what we've outlined. And
Yeah.
So I suppose it's quite a good point to introduce it, because obviously we're talking about your journey into surveying. What was the reason for starting up the student group then, in terms of off the back of the
Yeah.
the WhatsApps. Was the pain point just sort of being able to chat to each other, or was there other aspects that led you to going, we need another forum of some sort? So
I brought it from my own background of building communities and bringing people together, and I guess that's one aspect was the ability to ask questions, but I didn't feel there was anywhere because I know many students wouldn't dare asking questions, say on LinkedIn. You wouldn't go, oh, what is this defect, and put yourself out there because it's a very public area, public platform. And I felt there wasn't a group where I felt there was the support and feeling you could ask questions. But then also another area that I thought was really important is finding a mentor, finding someone to shadow, or finding a counsellor, And for me, it was easy. I had a strong network. I asked questions on LinkedIn. I got 3 mentors very quickly. But so many of my peers, so many of my other students didn't. And so I was like, well, maybe if we also grow this group, that was another opportunity to bring surveyors on board. And yet, so many have found mentors and shadowing through that group now. You just post and then talk about careers, and they talk about, just challenges they're having. But a big part I've noticed with the Facebook group is that a lot of people join, and one of the questions when they join is they have the option of, are you a student, are you a surveyor, etc., or are you thinking of training to be a surveyor? Lots join just with that, and so we get lots of people joining who aren't a surveyor yet, who are asking about courses, who are asking about pathways. And so we have people on there that know those areas and they answer all these questions. So it's also helping support potential new, future surveyors on there as well.
that's interesting then. So from what you're seeing in terms of the number of people that are signing up under that level of sort of looking to go into it, do you think I know that'll be a snapshot of the overall market,
Yeah.
as it's not going to be absolutely everyone, but are you seeing a trend of more and more people signing up, as in we're getting more interest in potentially new surveyors coming through, or is it stable, plateauing, going down?
I think over the past few years it's increasing. I think more and more there's a lot of work that's happening out in the industry at the moment, within the professional bodies, within colleges. There is so much universities, so much work going on to try and help elevate the profession, which is one of the things that we aim to do with Surveyors UK as well, is bring that together. But I am noticing, I'm seeing an increase in sort of awareness. I think things are starting to filter through with all the early engagement work that's happening through schools. There's so much going on, but I think we need a lot more. I still think we've got a way to go, because we've got this big gap between all these amazingly skilled, experienced surveyors. They're retiring, and we're losing that knowledge. I always say to people, I want to be able to download their brains because they have incredible knowledge, and then they're just retiring. And then you've got sort of a bit of a gap in the middle, and then you've got the new entrants starting to pick up. So we are very short skilled, as is, like, for example, other areas like construction. There is definitely a shortage of new talent coming in, but I think it's gradually improving bit by bit.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear, because we did a podcast episode with Sarah Noble from the RICS around early
Yeah,
engagement. So
yeah,
that's
I know Sarah. Yeah,
yeah, so that's a good episode to go listen to if people want to hear about how they can get involved in that side of things too.
right.
Yeah, you're right. It's difficult to see immediately the impact of those types of things, because anyone at school has to go through the process of finishing and moving on to other things, etc. So there are lag times on those initiatives. It's not an immediate uptick you're going to see. So it's good to hear that it seems to be having a positive effect, I
I
think,
think
on
it
people
is. I
coming through.
think it is, and I think there are also changes within. I've heard, people talking of trying to address, this area by introducing surveying within our existing topics at school. So within geography, so talking to some people who are looking to how do you just build it in, because you wouldn't just have a surveying, GCSE or whatever, but looking at how we talk about urban geography and the built environment. So why don't we have even just a little section on surveying?
Just to link the
Um,
process up. Yeah.
so it
Yes.
picks it up, because I actually did consider to look to be a surveyor actually before I went to university, but I found it really. I went to meet someone at like a stately home. He was an estate manager and he was a surveyor, but it was just so fuddy-duddy and very old school that it didn't attract me. So I didn't do that route.
Well, it's interesting because I felt the same at school. I was interested in the property industry, very broad, I'm interested in it generally. But when it came to looking at the surveying routes, for me, it was more where to start, because there are so many different avenues you can go down:
Oh,
quantity
so
surveying,
many.
residential, commercial,
Yeah,
and
that
I
is a
just didn't
big
know where to begin.
challenge. Yeah, that's something we're seeing a lot of, and obviously with what we're doing, Surveyors UK is for all surveying disciplines, but I've talked to so many students who they're doing, say, a generic building surveying degree, but they don't know which avenue to go down. And they want to have the experience, they want to have, maybe want to go into something like infrastructure or, like you say, or commercial, a bit more commercial side, but they're not sure. And it's how do you get that experience, And another big area is apprenticeships, which I think that's growing. So I'm talking to different sort of course providers, and there's a lot of steer towards that as another route. That seems to be on the increase, definitely. So I think that's positive, because I think people learn differently, and I think it's good to have all different options than the typical degree, you know.
I completely agree. I don't think that the degree route is necessarily right for quite a lot of people, and not in terms of are they good enough to do it, but is that how they learn? Is that how they are motivated? Cost, like so many different factors.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I think it's really important that we start building up the number of different routes into surveying and other industries. But I think it's more of a societal
Yeah,
push
it's a
into that.
whole thing. I think there's a whole thing around, promoting and showcasing surveying as a career. There is so
Yeah,
much going on, and there's so much amazing people out there that are doing brilliant things. And it's like, but where do you need to spread that awareness of that? And then I see a lot of professional organisations or bodies. They're doing certain things, but they're all doing it separately. And it's like, I want a place where we can bring that together and share that you do realise they're already doing this, so why do you leverage off this, or, not in silos, together. But
yeah.
yeah.
I think there was a point we discussed actually on that early engagement episode, which is that, potentially there's a fear of different people doing their own thing, because what happens if you take my candidate, or potential candidate down the line and stuff like that. But ultimately, there's always going to be some switching. So yes, you might lose some of yours, but you'll gain some of the others, and
Oh,
ultimately you
yeah.
create a bigger pie by working together, not by trying to
That's it,
keep
and
it to
I
yourself.
think, yeah, and I think everyone has different ways of their everyone has their own sort of objectives and agendas for what they want to achieve with certain memberships and things, but they all provide things in different ways. It's such a vast area, and it's quite mind-boggling as to, you know, how many different routes you can go down. But you can also don't have to necessarily stay in one thing either. You can then change later on, or
Yeah,
switch. I see and hear a lot about that, where someone's decided they don't want to do that area anymore. They're just going to focus on this niche, or
yeah, definitely. Well, we've started talking about this topic already, but one of the questions I want to ask is, what are the challenges students are facing? You must be seeing day to day what people are talking about on the group in terms of general trends. Um, what's the sort of, I suppose, the biggest three issues, do you think? And then we can maybe talk about afterwards how people can help with those. But
I think it's confusion over routes and how you go about it, which what you do, which pathways, whether you do the degree, or there's obviously the apprenticeship options, and you've got things like SAVA, that's obviously specifically residential surveying and valuation. I think it's also, the whole, for example, if we look at the RICS, there's the ASSOT RICS pathway, and, how then to become chartered. And there's a lot of challenges as to, I think that's all been looked at. I do believe that's been looked at the moment, and that would be great. But there is a lot of confusion over how do you get to the chartered route, and not necessarily just through a degree pathway. And that's such a common question on the group is, you know, do I go down this route or do I go down that route? That's like very, very common. Yeah.
I think with that, yeah, the important thing is as well is not just knowing what's the right route, but also what's my way back if it's the wrong route, and what does it give me and what does it not give me. It's that, you're right. It's all that clarity around, and I get it's a very difficult thing to do because it is such an expansive vocation in terms of the types of things you can go into. But equally, yeah, that I suppose the part of the challenge is once you solve that, it's clearer for people for how they come into the industry, what their routes are, what they can and can't do, how they backpedal to go into another route,
Yeah, and
or
it's that
sideways move.
experience of getting a taster for something, and I think it's enabling, and this is what the group that the student group has enabled, is that it's kind of basically enabled people to have a chat with surveyors, get an idea of, it's also just that, just having, what is the day in the life of, these routes. What does that involve? Whether it be, not just the building surveying route, but quantity surveying, commercial surveying. What does that actually involve in reality, as opposed to you read it online and this is what you do as a job? But actually, what does it involve? And I think there are so many good resources out there that you can find on different areas where people have done videos about it, and people newly qualified going out, or students, and you can see what they do, and they're out with the hard hats on site, as a new quantity surveyor, for example, and it's like, but people need to see that, and I think students need to see a bit more of that. It's not just, and the work-life balance, what does the actual job involve? The hours, the commitment, because I think there's a bit of misunderstanding about that, and some roles are far more desk-based and some are much more field-based, but there is a broad range between the two.
That's a very good point. On the point of getting out in the field to experience it, I suppose that touches on the difficulty you've already mentioned around getting mentoring or shadowing, whether it's
Mm.
during your course to be able to sign things off, or whether it's beforehand just to go, is this the right thing? What's the driver, do you think, that's causing people to, or firms not to offer those opportunities, do you think?
I think there's a number of things going on. I think a lot of it can be down to, I mean, obviously your bigger firms tend to have something set up for that, and they actively do encourage it. And some brilliant ones can be really supportive, and they just literally actively go out to get that. They want people to get on board, because then, with the proviso that over time they'll like the experience and then they'll become employees in the future. However, I think it's demand on time. So a lot of the areas, obviously, I have a lot of exposure to, is within sort of the building surveying, residential surveying area. And I think with smaller firms, you go out on site, and I've heard this a lot, when you have someone shadowing you, even if they're not particularly, interrupting, but you're teaching, your survey doubles in time. It literally takes twice as long. And then that's affecting, that business. If it's a small business, that's income. And I think it's all like expectations, and it's a misunderstandings between the two. So students knowing what to expect, and then surveyors setting out the parameters when they're out and about, what will I provide? What will this be? This is just some shadowing work, and you go out and about and you ask questions. And then you've got the full on mentoring, which is much more involved. Um, so I think a demand on time is a big one. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the number one. I mean, that really stands out for me. And also misunderstanding, surveyors feeling, well, they're not used to it. They're not used to teaching somebody. So they're actually nervous as
Yeah,
well.
true.
I've seen that. They're actually
Yeah,
comfortable. They're so experienced, but they're not used to having someone for them to then suddenly almost be a teacher, and show them what they're doing and explain it in a way that the student will understand. So I think there's some of that as well. But what I will say is, there are so many surveyors that are willing to do it. There are
yeah,
so many that I speak to, and it's one of the areas that we really want to address through the platform, through Surveyors UK, where people, professionals, will be able to opt in to be a mentor. So then they'll have literally a mentoring badge. So over time, you'll be able to search, a student will be able to search a directory for mentors in their area, so that we can help match them up. Um, that will obviously take time, and that will be as the site grows. But if we could tackle that area, that would be brilliant. But there's the whole side of it, is how you go and find a mentor, isn't there? And asking the right questions.
yeah. Well, I think we'll come on to that in terms of how to ask about finding a mentor. But I think one of the points you made actually is quite an opportunity on the flip side for surveyors. So where you're potentially looking at it as, it's going to take me longer, or will I be able to explain things in a good enough way? Actually, there's two benefits that could come from that. Just those 2 points. One is, it makes you stop and think about how you're going about your process? Is there better ways of doing things on site as the questions pop up? Because it makes you think outside your routine.
Yeah, true.
But the other is, if you can't explain something to someone on site that you're working with in a simple way, you're probably needing to review how you're writing the reports, because if you can't explain it to someone there and then visually when they're pointing at the building, it's another thing to get it in writing. So it starts to help you potentially consider different ways of communicating something
Yeah,
to
it's
write a
a good
better report.
point. Yeah, it's a really good point. It's getting things across and complex things, or in a more layman's terms, because the end reader of that report does not have that technical, and a student may not have that technical knowledge either yet. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, so it's just, I think for me, it's different ways of looking at it.
Mm.
But and again, it's, I suppose, down to how much you want to commit. You don't have to be doing it every single survey. It could be once a quarter, once every six
Yeah, it's
months.
managing expectations between them, that communication, and going, I can commit to this, but that is all I can do. And then
Yeah.
also, I do know some students can expect too much on the other side.
Mhm.
So it's kind of that marry up between the two.
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
think some guidance on both is something we need to have, we need to basically promote.
Definitely. On the point you were about to make, before I started to cut you off, so sorry for
That's right.
that, was I suppose students sometimes asking in the wrong way. So are there things that you see people do well, or students do well, students do sort of not so well, in terms of the way they ask for what they're trying to find in terms of mentoring? And
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, one of the biggest mediums that students currently try and find someone is through LinkedIn. And a lot of what I see is that only recently as well is where that, for example, if you're a surveyor and you get a message on LinkedIn, or you see something and someone's like, I'm looking for a mentor in this area, but their profile doesn't tell you anything about them, because I've seen that. That's not going to help your case. But what I also see is not enough information, so people don't put where where they're based, or what they're currently doing, what they're currently studying. What I've noticed is a good approach is where students like, looking for some mentoring. I've even seen that I'm happy to hold your equipment, I'll get you a coffee, and it's that kind of two-way. It's like, I'm not just going to demand all your time. It's kind of a two-way thing. And I know of students that have got involved helping out with desktop research, and that kind of thing as part of it. And so that's helping. So I think it needs to be seen also as a bit of a two-way. And I think those posts or those communications where the student is giving good information about themselves, positive, keen, I think that really helps.
yeah, I think that's a very valid point, actually, because you're more incentivized to help someone where they're helping themselves, but also if they are able to help you in some way, then it
Yeah.
reduces the burden of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that keenness and excitement, and I think surveys love that. I mean, you do, and you want to impart your knowledge. You want to do that, and I think where someone's put something and taken the time to write, that also tells you something about somebody.
Yeah.
Not just can you help? Question mark. I need a
Yeah.
mentor.
What
It's like,
with?
well, what does that mean? And also
Yeah.
outlining what it is you're looking for, and saying
Yeah.
it's only maybe once a week, or I'm happy with a small amount, just something would be good, because then you can get experience with more than one. You don't have to have just the one survey, because I didn't when I was doing it, so that I wasn't demanding lots of time, and they all work differently, so you learn different
Yeah.
things.
And it
So,
helps you then see that there isn't a perfect way to do it. That it's what works
yeah,
for you,
yeah,
having seen the
and
different
so
ways.
trying different ones and getting more than one is better as well, I think.
I think there's been some really interesting points you've raised, around all that. I suppose to round this topic off before we move on to, what is Surveyors UK and what it's helping to do with the industry generally. Um, what do you think is the biggest challenge then around getting new talent into the industry, and where people might be able to support that?
I think there is an overarching challenge whereby generally people do not know what a surveyor is and what a surveyor does. People know what an accountant is, a solicitor, lawyer, a doctor, these professions. Whereas even when I start to do the training, I get blank faces with some friends, like, what's that? And then I talk to so many people, and it's like a big, like, what does that mean? And so much confusion and misconception over what a surveyor is. And because it's such a huge, so many different types of surveyor, I think that hampers things, because then if you don't grow up anyone talking about, oh, what if you want to be a surveyor, or instead of being a doctor, a lawyer, solicitor, or any of these which people talk about through school, through university, people don't talk about, why don't you become a surveyor, or what that is. And I think that's a big issue. And I think there's a lot of people just don't know what surveyors do.
Interesting. Well, I think I think that's a nice point to wrap up. I think if for anyone looking to see how they can help with answering that question as to what is surveying and what is a surveyor, and helping younger generations coming through, we did a really interesting episode on early engagement with Sarah, as I mentioned earlier. So that's one to check out, and you can see how you can get involved in that side. But really interesting. Should we? We'll move on to topic 2, but so tune in for that.